One thing about Star Wars and why it's still so popular is it essentially takes an existing concept of the hero and really just evolves it to the next level. I mean, this has been evolving throughout pop culture. But it also takes the very familiar and kind of spins it on its head. It takes what we would call tropes and kind of updates them or, mixes them with better special effects, better filmmaking to create a new mythology. And while you could go to town talking about all of the things Star Wars has that other pieces of sci fi do, one thing that really stands out with Star Wars is that it has kind of a real world backbone. And part of that is the World War II fighter pilot. And this is a big reason why I love Rebel pilots personally. It's a big part of my personal collection, and they have a spot on their very own shelf in my office where most of my Star Wars figures kind of live in the back in small little drawers. But I love the pilots. And, well, Kenner and Hasbro have done us right and given us so many of them over the years in the modern line. And they're easily recognizable to the ship that they pilot, coming in fun, bright colors for you to recognize. And hey, let's face it, for kids, that's a real part of the allure as well. The most well known of the pilots, of course, is the orange one, and these are the guys that pilot snow speeders and X-Wings. The very first pilot we got in Power of the Force 2 was a snow speeder Luke, although it was called X-Wing Luke. Despite him being in his snow speeder outfit, there are differences between the version worn in the X-Wing and the version worn in the Snowspeeder. But when looking at the Rebel pilot as a whole, they sort very easily by color, making them fun to display, fun to collect, and for kids, fun to play with. So we have our red B-Wing pilots. Those are the, kind of cross-shaped ships, I guess B if you look at it on its side. And then the green A-Wing pilots that fly the A-Wings that are the kind of wedge-shaped ships. Oh, and yes, I know B-Wing also stands for Blade Wing, if you're going to get into the continuity. But, because A and B shouldn't exist in Star Wars because they have Arabesh, but that's a whole other video. All right, back to this specific SKU. The Power of the Force 2 A-Wing fighter, including A-Wing pilot. So this is a significant toy for the evolution of Star Wars action figures and ships in general, because it was the first time a figure was packed in with a spaceship. Back in the 1980s, the toy line that was known for having pack-in figures was G.I. Joe. Almost all of the vehicles, from the smallest vehicles to the one-manned vehicles to even their largest vehicle ever, came with an exclusive figure. And this was both for play right out of the box, and it was the only way you could get all the figures, was buying all the vehicles too. With Star Wars, the vintage line traded figures usually for electronics like battle sounds or other features. It was kind of a trade-off as far as the A price or the X Factory. There were some exceptions, like when figures were included with the mini rigs, but usually this was for a special promotion or to eat up excess stock. And while Power of the Force 2 did offer figures as pack-in with speeder bikes, this is a small ground-based one-man space motorcycle. The A-Wing with pilot was the very first time we got a Star Wars spaceship with a pilot. A closed canopy, it, can actually fly through space. Not that I'm saying, comparing A-Wings to speeder bikes and how cool they are or one or the other, but, it is significant. It's also noted that this A-Wing pilot is one of a very small handful of figures that has no peg holes in the bottom of his feet, since he was meant to just go in the cockpit. So if you're standing him up with the rest of your figures, he doesn't have a peg. There's a few different shots of A-Wing pilots in Return of the Jedi. Mostly we see them with a helmet like this, where it's kind of wrapped around the head with a little microphone sticking out, or, comlink. We also see them with more of the Y-Wing style helmet. This is the guy who unfortunately gets blasted. We also see in the deleted scenes there were female A-Wing pilots and even alien A-Wing pilots. This Mon Calamari pilot shows up in a deleted scene that was released on the Blu-ray edition. And he got his own action figure too, although illustrated art was used for the card since there were really no film stills showing him in the cockpit other than that close-up. And this is actually pretty significant because in the original trilogy, there were very, very few alien pilots. In fact, unlike the Disney movies, where I have a ton, you really only have 9 who gets to co-pilot the Millennium Falcon. And then, of course, there's his older brother, 10 get it? 9, 10. He's seen here in the Rebel briefing scene, and yes, that's not 9 Look at the outfit. He's wearing a B-Wing pilot. There's also some footage of 10 and a white B-Wing pilot, although this never made the movie. And he also shows up on Endor in his red B-Wing pilot. That's not 9 it's 10 All right, so back to the A-Wing pilots. So this is our green outfitted pilot. Not blue, not white, not red, not orange, but green. And, hey, it makes them stand out. I guess the Rebel Alliance was all about color coordinating and making sure when you're running through the hangar, you know where you're going. The A-Wing pilot was a very, very late release in the original line, the retro line, the vintage line. I still can't figure out what we're calling it, but the old one from Kenner in the 80s. And it was basically a green guy with a black chest strap and a non-removable helmet. His art is one of 4 or 5 figures that don't have a picture of the figure, but a picture of the ship. He later got a re-release in the Droids animated line and did get to have card art of the actual pilot there, in an animated style, but it was the same exact figure. It wasn't re-sculpted to make him look animated. We didn't get a single carded A-Wing pilot in the modern line until the 30th anniversary line with Taicho Chilio. I know, I'm never good with these Star Warsian names. Sorry, Obi-Wan Kenobi. So this was a cool figure, not only because it was our first carded A-Wing pilot in the modern line, but he came with sort of multiple looks. He had the skull cap, he had the helmet, or you could have him with just a head. But this figure isn't in the movie. This was a figure created by Michael Stackpole for the novels and video games, although he was later retconned into Return of the Jedi that he was one of the many A-Wings seen, flying around, but you never got a close-up of him. But technically he's expanded universe. So we've had other A-Wing pilots too. There's our 10 there in his white outfit, never seen in the movie, but as part of a 3-pack. And we've had other A-Wing pilots as single pack-ins with A-Wings. This one part of, I guess, Green Squadron, which is another sort of expanded universe take on the A-Wing. There's always room to repaint existing tooled vehicles. And there were other A-Wing pilots released as part of multi-packs, usually to break it up so you weren't getting 3 orange figures. Or in this case, you had a droid, a white guy, a green guy, and a black guy. So, at least you had some color variety there in the pack and, different than just getting, what would look like 3 or 4 of the same figure if they were all X-Wing pilots. Although I would have bought that. So this guy, is basically very much an update of the vintage sculpt, especially because he has a non-removable helmet. And we would continue to get A-Wing figures packed in, even with the new Disney movies, which also had, I guess, modernized X-Wings, since, they take place in the future. And what's interesting about the vehicle, I'm not going to go too much about the vehicle, since I'm not a vehicle collector. I've long since donated most of my Star Wars vehicles to my daughter's school. They're probably having a lot of fun. So the A-Wing was just a direct pickup from the vintage A-Wing, which was only released in the Droids line. It never made it into the Power of the Force or the Return of the Jedi line. It was a late release, but it works for the movie as well as for Droids. The version that was released in the 80s was very, clean, if you will, white with the red stripe. There wasn't much battle damage. It had stickers you could apply. The new Power of the Force 2 version got a brand new deco with battle damage and, paint scrapes, as well as different colored panels and some, extra gray, as well as some burn effects on the engines. Although it's interesting because it shared the exact same tool. If you flip it over, the battery compartment is still there, but the electronics have been gutted. There's no electronics in this version, but because it's the same exact tool, you could still open the battery compartment and maybe, store Rebel secret plans inside or something. I wonder if kids thought that was just like a secret compartment. So whether you collect figures by species, because maybe you just absolutely love Mon Calamari, or you collect by job because you love pilots, like me, well, A-Wing pilots tend to show up. They are a staple of the Alliance, and they're here to help take down the Empire. Go A-Wing pilots. And our first ever Power of the Force 2 A-Wing pilot with a vehicle. Pretty cool. Oh, and one last note while we're talking about victories, not necessarily for the Rebel Alliance, but for toy collecting. This particular SKU, I have a very, very vivid memory of finding at retail. Well, most of the time, I and we probably all had to wake up at the crack of dawn, especially in the Power of the Force 2 era, to wait outside stores and hope that you can be the first in to get new figures put out. This toy I remember very specifically getting at the Tustin, California Toys R Us and getting it in the middle of the day. I remember I just was driving by, I walked in thinking, well, there'll never be anything out, in the middle of the afternoon, and there was the A-Wing. And I remember just being so excited to find it on shelf and to have not had to woken up early to get it.